In today's video, we're focusing a lot on the Chicago Blackhawks and the Edmonton Oilers. In Chicago, Corey Perry and Peter Mrazek were mysteriously missing from practice after Perry was healthy scratched the night before. Seems to be some asset management going on, perhaps some things we don't know there. Plus, Taylor Hall is injured again and done for the season. We also have news on the NHL waiver wire, some other roster updates from around the NHL, and some updates as well regarding the Jackets and Patrick Laine. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today. Some more speculation around the Blackhawks and the Oilers. We're going to get into some of that here in just a few minutes' time. But first up, a few other news and notes from around the league. First up, we got news from the NHL waiver wire today. We have 2 players on waivers, and we also found out that Anaheim Ducks player Chase DeLeo, who was placed on waivers yesterday, did in fact clear, so he'll be reassigned to their minor league affiliate. On waivers today, the Minnesota Wild have forward Vinny Lettieri, and Tampa Bay Lightning have goaltender Matt Tompkins. Of course, but Tompkins being on waivers, that tells us that likely tomorrow, assuming Tompkins is either cleared or picked up, which is hard to say, there's a chance he gets picked up. More likely he clears, though. At this point, that means Vasilevsky's ready to return. We already heard from John Cooper a couple days ago saying on their upcoming 3-game trip that he was very confident that Vasilevsky would play in at least one of those games. And at the very least, we heard also that even if he didn't play the first game of the road trip, he should be at the very least ready to back up. So obviously that means it's time for Tompkins to go on waivers and be demoted, and Vasilevsky returns. So as I've said before, good news for Tampa, bad news for everybody else, especially those in the Atlantic Division. So that's your waiver wire news. Lots of other news regarding some injuries we want to take a look at. The Chicago Blackhawks today confirmed that Taylor Hall has an ACL injury that requires surgery, and he's going to be out for the rest of the campaign. So Hall has not had a good run in his brief time in Chicago. He's been in and out of the lineup. Obviously, this is something that's been he's been dealing with since very, very early at the beginning of the season. And apparently, I think it was in practice, they said he caught like a rut or something on the ice, and it was enough to kind of just tweak it a little further to kind of put it beyond to the point that he just couldn't do it anymore. So Hall is having knee surgery on his right knee and is done for the season. Lots of other stuff going on in Chicago, which we'll talk about here in just a few minutes' time. We also saw an update today on John Klingberg in Toronto. Comments from Sheldon Keefe makes it sound like he's definitely going to be out for an extended time, but he said that he's kind of working through some things and going through the process, and they really don't know what kind of timelines they're looking at. So at this point, I think it's fair to say Klingberg is still going through stuff with doctors and looking at options, I guess you could say. I don't know if they really have a firm plan for him, but he is going to be out long-term, and he's been placed on long-term injured reserve. I know I've seen comments today from TSN analyst Mike Johnson, who definitely said for anybody out there who's thinking that the Klingberg injury is fake or they're bluffing or anything like that, they're definitely not. He said he firsthand was on a flight with him in the past few days, and he said that you could tell that he was not healthy just from being around him. He had a difficult time even walking, and clearly the hip issue is significant. So most people think, I know Johnson went on to say that he said he placed very high odds that Klingberg is done for the season. Lots of other NHL reporters are saying the same thing. Obviously, at this point, the Leafs have him on LTIR, so they can use the money for call-ups. But if we see the Leafs go ahead and make a move for another defenseman and spend that money, then we know he's not coming back. And I would suspect it wouldn't be shocking here maybe in the next few weeks as he goes through options and everything and with doctors and whatnot, then they'll probably come to an announcement to confirm his status. I would suspect before his time to be eligible to return, which would be in a month from now, that we'll hear some more clarity and likely get confirmation that he's done for the season. Likely never plays for Toronto again. He'll be a free agent next offseason. I would imagine this is going to really hurt his contract options for next year. It's hard to imagine a few years back he was offered a long-term deal with the Dallas Stars. I know it seemed by his standards that it was a low ball. I think it was around 8 times 8 or maybe a little bit less than that. I don't think it was quite as much as they were going to be paying Miro Heiskanen, and he turned it down, went into free agency, and he couldn't get a long-term deal anywhere. He took the 1-year higher paying deal from the Ducks. And of course, last year he bounced around a bit, didn't have the greatest season, then comes to Toronto this year and he can barely play. So I think he's probably kicking himself for the decisions made around contracts at that point in time. But we'll see with that having taken place. The Maple Leafs now have just shy of $17 million on long-term injured reserve. They've called up Alex Steeves as well to add his name into the roster as well to take a spot here. So we'll see what they do for Klingberg. Connor Timmins is expected to be coming back and activated here very shortly as well. One good thing we did see last night, Columbus, they had a big... I guess I don't know what you want to call it, but the floodgates open for their goal scoring, and they had a big win over Chicago, which Chicago is one of the weaker teams in the league, so you don't want to get too overconfident in that sense. But defenseman Zach Werenski actually ended up setting a team record for 4 assists, so most assists in one game last night by a Columbus Blue Jackets defenseman. So Werenski had a big night. Also, speaking of Columbus, lots of talk around Patrik Laine still. I know Elliotte Friedman on his various radio hits today was talking a bit about the future of Laine in Columbus, and kind of basically said at this point, it's not known that Laine has requested a trade. Like, there's nobody saying that he has, but he's made comments saying that he felt kind of blindsided and embarrassed by the healthy scratch the other night. He did come back and play last night, had a goal, which was good, but is the damage already done? And basically what Friedman said is he thinks there's a lot more going on in Columbus, and essentially that, they may get to the point that they have to talk to some of these players like Laine and say, maybe we have to explore, moving you and see what he thinks and see where he might like to go or what he might like to do and kind of go from there. He is making a lot of money, but he doesn't have a ton of term, especially if they were willing to retain or eat a little bit of that contract. I think there's probably teams out there that would be willing to give him a chance. Problem is if he plays like he has been so far this year, he's not going to live up to the contract, and they're not going to want to do it. There won't be much of a return is the other issue, right? They obviously want to get him going and not have to sell really low, because then you're trading from a position of weakness, and that typically doesn't work out too well for you. But I do wonder at some point here with the situation in Laine and Columbus, and maybe others too, not just Laine, considering how things have gone with Johnny Gaudreau. At what point is your other veterans like Werenski or even Elvis Merzlikins, at what point are they going to be like, maybe we want to go somewhere else and have a better chance to win? The organization, in my opinion, is at a bit of a crossroads and definitely needs some significant change, and I think that needs to start at the top, but we'll see. It doesn't seem like that's going to be happening here anytime soon. Now, on to the other speculation around Chicago and how it all links to Edmonton. So essentially, leading into last night's game, Corey Perry, the practice before, had been practicing with the team like normal, was during line rushes, was in his regular spot. I believe he's I think he's 4th on the team in scoring. For what he was brought in to do, I don't think anybody's upset with his play on the ice. Then all of a sudden we get to the game last night and he's not in warm-ups, and everybody, all they would say would be he's a healthy scratch, and it's an organizational decision. And then today they practiced this morning and he's not there. So I've heard different reports. Some people say, well, he might have been pissed from the healthy scratch and maybe he wants out. Maybe he thinks he was embarrassed, wants to trade. Other people, which just seem to be the more common theory out there, is that Chicago is doing what they call asset protection, and we are in the midst of getting a trade done. Now, that's difficult to say without any, certainty. I mean, there's lots of people out there that want to think this is going to happen, and to some degree it makes sense. If you look at earlier, before, with all the Perry stuff aside, Oilers reporter for TSN Ryan Rishaug was saying that right now all eyes are on GM Ken Holland. Only asset that he apparently doesn't want to move is this year's first-round pick, outside, of course, McDavid and Draisaitl. And other than that, everything's on the table. Every other roster player, every other prospect, every other pick. They're willing to entertain anything, but they don't want to make a panic move. They don't want to get themselves in a situation where they make a terrible trade and really impact the future in a negative way, but at the same time, they can't sit back and do nothing. This team is in free fall, and they have to do something here to try to save the season. Otherwise, think about the negativity that's going to keep festering around this team, and the more you let that build, the more you don't want to end up in a situation where 97 or 29 says, all right, I'm done here. I need to move. Like, I'm not doing this anymore, right? It's funny, too, because I know one of the main prospects we mentioned in all the trade talk is Xavier Bourgault. Well, when he was drafted a few years ago, the Oilers had the prime opportunity to draft a pretty elite stud goalie prospect. And I don't know if he's going to be a stud goalie in the NHL, but as a prospect, he has been. And that's Jesper Wallstedt, who ended up going to the Minnesota Wild. The Oilers had a prime spot, and considering the lack of goalie depth in the organization, I thought for sure, I remember watching that draft saying, okay, the Oilers, they're gonna do well here and get themselves a stud goalie prospect. At least they have somebody in the organization, because at that point, we didn't even know Skinner was going to be a player. And at this point, he may not be a player for long if his play doesn't improve. I mean, he's still young enough that he's not going to be out of the league tomorrow or anything like that. But, he's... At that point, we didn't know yet that Skinner was even going to be able to be a regular. We're still looking at, Koskinen and Smith era of the Oilers goaltending, at which point a lot of people complained about it, but man, does Mike Smith ever look good right now. I mean, I know would have been even a few years older, probably no way he could play, obviously at his age, but I just remember all the complaints about Smith, and I bet you could take him back in a heartbeat now based on what you've been getting out of Campbell and Skinner and the brief appearances from Pickard so far. Not to say that it's all on goaltending, because the defense, the D has been absolutely horrendous. Absolute big pile of dog doo-doo. And it's not just the D either. It's just the whole team. Like, even McDavid and Draisaitl were watching on one of the goals I seen in their last game against the Hurricanes. But McDavid and Draisaitl were coming back into the zone to defend, and they didn't even defend. They just they were puck watching and just let Marty Necas come in amongst 4 Oilers and take a shot. Like, the effort's not even there. They seem lost, clueless, don't know what to do, don't know where to go, and it's just mind-boggling how these guys are pro hockey players and this looks so disjointed and confused out there. It's just hard to wrap your head around. But all that being said, it's kind of ironic in a sense that now you're looking at trading the prospect that you took instead of Wallstedt to get a goaltender. Anyways, everything's kind of coming full circle here. But Ryan Rishaug also made a point that they need to make a trade soon-ish, whether it be for a goaltender, to get another top defenseman to come in and try to help stabilize things. Something. He said they could probably use another player. At least, he made mentions of a player or two who could be like a Stanley Cup pedigree. He referenced Pat Maroon. Didn't say it would have to be Maroon himself, but like a player of that caliber, a role player, good positive guy, good in the room, good guy to rally around. Not going to necessarily be a guy that come in and light you up with tons of points and offense, but just, a lead by example, hardworking player, not afraid to drop the gloves. He's got a lot of playoff experience. Everywhere Pat Maroon goes, he seems to win the Stanley Cup. Obviously his connection to the team as a former Oiler as well. Just like that kind of player. And then all of a sudden everything starts going on with Corey Perry, which leads people to think, well, maybe Perry's their target. If Chicago eats half of his salary, they overpaid him this year, $4 million. So if they eat half, they knocks it down to $2 million. Then there's Peter Mrazek, who mysteriously didn't show up at practice today too. So now a lot of people are like going in a frenzy here that Mrazek and Perry must be getting ready to be traded to the Oilers. If they did that, Chicago could certainly, especially with the injury to Hall and everything, and if they get Perry off the books, even with money retained, they could definitely take on Campbell. And we know the Blackhawks at this point are not really concerned about winning. They're still heavy into this rebuild, right? And they're going to be a few years out before they're really looking to be competitive. They could take Campbell. And even if they wanted to do a buyout on them, either next summer or the summer after, they could handle it better than most teams. Like I said, the Sharks are another team that could look to. You have to, it kind of all adds up and makes sense. Now, I don't know that Perry and Mrazek are exactly who I'd label as your saviors to come in and save the Oilers and get them back on track. I like Perry, good player, cup pedigree. Sure, he's got lots of experience in the playoffs, has a cup to his name. I think he could be a good addition in a lot of positive ways. Is Mrazek going to be your savior? Kind of remember a couple of years ago, the Leafs paid the Blackhawks to take him off their hands. He's been a very inconsistent goalie in his time. He's been very good at times, but he's also been inconsistent. He's also battled a ton of injuries. To me, Mrazek's a good goalie, but he comes with a fair share of risk. There's no doubt. I don't know that I'm going to gamble if I'm Edmonton and put all my eggs in that basket to bring in Mrazek to take over from Campbell. I mean, at the same time, you want to take the workload off of Skinner so he can be more of a backup at this stage. I don't know that that's the way to go. I mean, we talked about all the options around the goalies in Montreal. Again, is that a perfect solution? Not really. The good news here, I guess, is if they can move Campbell, they're going to have to give up some extra assets to make it happen for sure. Chicago's not going to take him for nothing. But the Mrazek contract is obviously not far from expiring, so at least they could be getting themselves a clean slate in the not-too-distant future, but they're going to have to pay a pretty price to get there. So it's difficult to say how this is all going to go. Like I said, San Jose is another team to watch. You got to even wonder about, because teams that are remotely close to contending, they're not going to be throwing Edmonton a bone here. But teams that are out of it will be more likely to work together at this point. You got to wonder, maybe Columbus. We know that the Oilers need help on defense because they're so bad right now. We know the Jackets have been mentioned for having extra D that they want to move. Maybe there's something there. Elvis Merzlikins now, or Spencer Martin could be a potential goalie target as well that maybe comes in. I don't know. I mean, you have to think something's got to give here. But with all the sudden disappearance of Perry and the fact that the team won't talk about it, he's got everybody all in the buzz going, what's going on with Corey Perry? Is he being traded? Is this asset management? All they would say is an organizational decision. To me, if it was something non-hockey related, and let's say there was something personal going on with Corey Perry, they would just say that. They wouldn't give you the details, but they would say, due to personal reasons, and that's all we're going to say, Perry's not with the team right now. That's what they would do. So to me, that's not what's going on. He ends up, practicing like he's going to play, does the morning skate like he's going to play, get to the game, and all of a sudden he's not in warm-up. No explanation from the team. Not saying he's hurt. They're not saying it's personal. Organizational decision. So the only other option is either he's in the process of being traded or he did something to break a rule, policy, or something, and he's being disciplined. But again, a long-time veteran like him, it just seems unlikely that something like that would happen. I guess you never know. Everybody screws up, makes mistakes sometimes. Just seems like a really weird scenario. And like I said, it's got people talking, saying Edmonton, Chicago must be working on a trade. But let me know what you think. Does this seem reasonable to you? If you're Ken Holland, Jeff Jackson, the Oilers, is this where you put all your risk here? Do you do this kind of deal? Let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll discuss further. Hopefully we get clarity on the situation here soon so we can know if this is a real rumor or if there's something else to this that we're not aware of as of yet. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.